Hey everybody, this is Jake Wynn, Director of Interpretation at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Continuing on with our On Tour series focused on the Battle of Monocacy and the medical care administered in the aftermath of that battle in July of 1864. So far, we have visited with Tracy Evans, Park Ranger at Monocacy National Battlefield. She's given us an overview of the events leading up to and the events on July 9th, 1864 at the Monocacy Visitor Center, which you can visit today. We also have spent some time with Ryan Quint, historian and author, at the Worthington Farm and the Thomas Farm on Monocacy National Battlefield itself. And now we have moved into Frederick, Maryland. About 3 miles north of the battlefield itself, we've moved into the town. And we're going to be talking about the largest medical facility during the Civil War era here in Frederick, Maryland. One of the buildings, the surviving buildings from that hospital complex, U.S. General Hospital No. 1, stands just behind me. We'll talk about that in just a second, the history of this remarkable hospital and how that fits into the Monocacy story. Before we dive into that story fully, though, do want to share how you all can help us. You can give us a like on this video if you've been enjoying this playlist, or if you're just watching this video as a standalone video. You can help us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also become a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Great way to support these videos and other content like it, and you get lots of cool perks as well. In creating this series, we did have some help from the Monocacy National Battlefield Foundation as well. Great folks there doing great work to save, preserve, and protect the Monocacy National Battlefield. You'll find more information about them in the link below as well. All right, so where are we right now? We are in Frederick, Maryland, which at the time of the Civil War was a pretty crucial strategic point. It's what leads armies here to Frederick starting in 1861, brings the Confederate Army here in 1862, leading up to the Antietam Campaign. Armies are going to pass through in 1863, and then of course what we've been talking about today is the events of the summer of 1864. Frederick stands at the crossroads in this region of Maryland with the main east-west road, the National Road, going from Baltimore, cutting through Frederick, heading west over the mountains towards the Alleghenies. You also have a major north-south road that goes through Frederick. That is on the Monocacy battlefield. We saw it with Ranger Tracy Evans earlier. The Georgetown Road that goes south to Washington, D.C. Road goes north towards Pennsylvania, leading to a town called Gettysburg. So those roads are really what bring the armies here throughout the American Civil War. There's also a Baltimore and Ohio rail spur that jumps off of the main line, which goes south, just south of Frederick, right through what is now Monocacy National Battlefield and was the battlefield in 1864. But one of those lines came in here to Frederick as well. So there's a railroad with access to Frederick as well. So this is a really strategically important location during the Civil War, about 8,000 residents. And as the Civil War is beginning in 1861, armies begin to arrive in Frederick. The U.S. Army is going to show up in the summer of 1861. They're going to begin to garrison Frederick. There's going to be soldiers encamped in and around the city. Large numbers of them are going to show up for the first time in the fall of 1861. And unfortunately, anywhere these armies go, disease and sickness follows. And so starting in the fall of 1861, with large groups of soldiers encamped on the outskirts of the city, there is need for a medical facility to care for the soldiers who are coming down with sicknesses like typhoid fever and dysentery and the measles that is rapidly spreading through these army camps. And so as the residents of Frederick, along with the military officials here, are looking around for a location for a hospital, for a military hospital, they're going to select the building behind me. This is constructed during the Revolutionary era. It's actually part of, this is the surviving twin. There is another building just off to my right, your left. There was a twin, an exact reverse of this building behind me, located just over here. And these two buildings are constructed as a barracks during the Revolutionary War era. These buildings are going to become known as the Hessian Barracks because this encampment around these barracks buildings, what will become later the Frederick Fairgrounds, was essentially a large military parade ground, which is going to become a military prison camp for Hessian soldiers during the American Revolution. In the early 19th century, this is going to be a fairgrounds, but it's also going to be where the militia in Frederick are going to gather. They're going to go off to the War of 1812 from here. There's Lewis and Clark connections to this building as well. This is these buildings were very historic, even at the time of the American Civil War. And so with the outbreak of the conflict and soldiers arriving here in Frederick, you need a place to locate a hospital. This is going to be where they're going to locate it. It's going to start in these buildings, but they're going to expand to a whole complex that is going to include dozens of buildings on multiple acres of ground stretching back behind the camera towards Mount Olivet Cemetery. This ground was all hilltop overlooking the city, a perfect spot for a Civil War hospital. Starting in 1861, patients are going to begin to fill up these buildings and then the other barrack buildings that are going to be constructed here. This is going to be the scene of quite a drama in September of 1862 with the arrival of the Army of Northern Virginia under Robert E. Lee. Confederate forces will occupy what becomes known as General Hospital No. 1, which included the Hessian Barracks behind me. They're going to capture all of the patients, the medical supplies here, and they're going to fill this facility with Confederate wounded. This site will see casualties from battles such as South Mountain, Antietam. Gettysburg casualties are going to be treated here as well. Fighting in the Shenandoah Valley in 1862, 1863, and in 1864 are going to be transported here. But one of the most chaotic times in this hospital's existence happens in July of 1864, and that is with the Battle of Monocacy. It takes place just a few miles south of here. We would be well within cannon shot, both actually firing of cannon, but also the sound of cannons just to the south of here. And so this hospital is going to play a central role in what happens in the aftermath of the Battle of Monocacy. By the time of that battle, this hospital had space for several thousand patients. And so as the Battle of Monocacy is ongoing and then in its aftermath, patients are going to be stretchered or put into ambulances and brought in from the battlefield down along the Monocacy River, being brought to this hospital, and are going to fill up United States General Hospital No. 1. This facility is going to take in all of these casualties. And this is actually quite impressive when you compare what had happened just 2 years earlier, the Battle of Antietam. Frederick itself, 27 buildings are going to have to be used as makeshift hospitals because of how many casualties were coming into the city, but also there was not yet enough room at this hospital facility to care for all of those patients. With the Battle of Monocacy, we see several thousand patients are going to need to be seen and cared for, and this facility by that time had expanded enough to be able to take in all of those casualties that are in need of additional medical care. They're going to be brought here to U.S. General Hospital No. 1, are going to be cared for in the hours, days, and weeks following the Battle of Monocacy. This hospital facility is going to keep on operating right up until the aftermath of the Civil War. In the summer of 1865, this facility will be closed as a hospital. The barracks will go back to their pre-war roles as housing for a lot of the gear for Frederick militia organizations. Frederick Fairgrounds is going to come back here as well. But eventually, in 1868, this is going to become the grounds of a new school. The Maryland School for the Deaf will locate on the same ground that was once occupied by United States General Hospital No. 1. And in conclusion on this, what's important about U.S. General Hospital No. 1 is it's Frederick's largest medical facility during the Civil War, cares for more than 10,000 patients over the course of its existence. And this facility is also going to play a role in a lot of key innovations that are going to take place during the Civil War in regards to battlefield evacuation, caring for patients, as well as some of the scientific advances that are being made in the Civil War in regards to evidence-based medicine, scientific studies that are going to be performed during the conflict. And so Frederick, Maryland is going to play a really key role in a lot of the evolutions that we talk about at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. I'm going to turn it over. I have an additional story here in just a moment from my friend and colleague, Ryan Quint. Going to talk a little bit about U.S. General Hospital Number 1 and one soldier in particular whose story is tied up with the Battle of Monocacy and with this hospital as well.
So as we stand in front of Hessian Barracks, General Hospital Number 1, we think about the chaos of the Battle of Monocacy and what's going on around it. And one individual story kind of shows that happening. And that is Daniel Long of the 151st New York Infantry. Part of Ricketts' division, he fought at the Thomas Farm. And as Gordon's Confederates forced Ricketts out of their positions around 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the afternoon of July 9th, it kind of became an every man for himself situation where Federals were fleeing kind of every single direction. And in his retreat, Daniel Long got cut off from the rest of his regiment. And so he did the pertinent thing. He hid himself away for the night. As July 10th came, he waited for the Confederates to leave late in the afternoon on their way to Washington. And then he made his way into Frederick. And he reported to the first kind of authority he could find, a provost marshal, kind of a military police officer, expecting that he would be sent back to his unit. But rather, Daniel Long, this kind of run-of-the-mill infantryman, was sent here to General Hospital Number 1 to help out the wounded. And so he becomes kind of an impromptu medical aide, or a clerk, if you will, helping out at the hospital. And he'll be here for 2 months talking about the patients and their recovery and what he does to help out. And that's kind of, again, Long's story is kind of revealing of what's going on here. His letters are filled with all kinds of information. Noted Frederick resident Jacob Engelbrecht comes and visits, and so we can kind of compare Engelbrecht's and Long's views on the matter to see what's kind of going on. And one of Long's more interesting recollections, if you will, is that he realized that soldiers who had mangled limbs cut off in the long term had a greater chance to survive. And soldiers who were expressing wills to not cut it off were developing gangrene and other infections and dying soon thereafter. And so Long actually writes in a letter back home, he says, if I am shot, I want the limb cut off, because his personal kind of observances here showed the long-term ability of doctors and surgeons to care for patients. And so again, just a quick story on Daniel Long, 151st New York, his personal experiences here and what they reveal at General Hospital Number 1.